Researchers spent decades trying to compare the constitutions of different countries. They hired legal scholars, built translation teams, wrote papers. And they still couldn't answer a simple question: which two countries have the most similar constitutional DNA? A developer just answered it for all 188 of them with a 3D map you can spin with your mouse. Constitutionalmap.ai takes every article from 188 national constitutions, that's over 30,000 individual legal clauses, runs them through AI embedding models, and plots them in three-dimensional space. Articles that mean similar things end up close together, regardless of what country wrote them, what language they were written in, or what century they came from. What does that look like in practice? You open the map and you see a universe of glowing dots. Zoom into one cluster and you find articles about freedom of speech from Germany, Brazil, South Korea, and Ghana sitting almost on top of each other. Zoom into another and you find emergency powers clauses from countries that have never shared a border, never shared a language, but apparently shared the same fears when they wrote their foundational laws. The tool lets you click any article and instantly see its nearest neighbors across the entire dataset. You're not searching by keyword. You're not filtering by country or region. The AI has read the meaning, not the words, and it shows you what's conceptually close. A clause about the right to education in Finland turns out to be semantically adjacent to one in Rwanda. That's not a translation artifact. That's a genuine structural echo. But here's the thing, this is where the honest part comes in. The map is breathtaking to explore, but it is not a legal analysis tool. It does not tell you whether similar articles are interpreted similarly in courts. Two constitutions can have nearly identical text about freedom of assembly and produce completely opposite outcomes in practice. The embedding model captures linguistic and conceptual proximity. It cannot capture judicial history, enforcement gaps, or the political context that turns a written right into a real one. It also doesn't handle amendment timelines. If a country rewrote a key article in 2018, the map treats the current version as the whole story. You lose the historical trajectory. And for constitutions that exist primarily in oral or customary tradition, some Pacific Island nations, for example, the coverage is incomplete by definition. Text-based embeddings need text. What surprised me was the sheer density of certain clusters. The emergency powers zone is uncomfortably crowded. Dozens of constitutions, from wildly different political systems, converge on almost identical language when it comes to suspending rights in a crisis. That's either a reassuring sign of global consensus or a warning about how similar the playbook looks across very different regimes. So where does this go from here? The realistic next step is temporal layering, showing how constitutional language drifts over time as amendments are added. Imagine watching a country's constitution move through the semantic space across decades, drifting toward or away from clusters of democracies or authoritarian states. That would turn this from a snapshot into a timeline. There's also a plausible use case for constitutional drafters. Countries that are rewriting their constitution, and there are always a few, could use this map to identify which existing constitutions are structurally closest to their current draft, then study what worked and what didn't in those models. Not copying, but orienting. For educators and researchers, the embedding API underneath this could power a completely new kind of comparative law course. Instead of reading 20 constitutions linearly, students navigate the semantic space and discover connections themselves. That's a fundamentally different way to learn legal structure. So why does this exist? Because comparative constitutional law has always been bottlenecked by human bandwidth. You need specialists who speak multiple languages, understand multiple legal traditions, and can hold dozens of documents in their heads simultaneously. That's maybe a few hundred people in the world. AI embeddings don't replace that expertise, but they give everyone else a map before the expedition starts. The person who built this wasn't a legal scholar. They were a developer who looked at a dataset of constitutional texts and asked, what if meaning, not language, was the organizing principle? The answer is a 3D atlas that reveals patterns no human reading program could have surfaced in a reasonable timeframe. Does it win? Yes, for exploration, for education, for generating hypotheses. Does it replace legal analysis? Absolutely not. But it gives you a place to start that didn't exist before, and for 30,000 articles across 188 countries, that's not nothing. Next episode, we're looking at a tool that does something similar for scientific papers, mapping 50 million abstracts into a navigable semantic space. If this constitutional map surprised you, that one is going to break your sense of scale entirely. Subscribe so you don't miss it.